Welcome to another episode of War Hero to Superhero, helping military veterans and first responders transform their lives from the prayer room to the boardroom. As you saw our intro, it's a little outdated, but we only added one more room, which everybody needs. So I have a special guest for the battle room, and I know it looks like the sun is setting, but it's about to get hot in here because I've had a guest that actually fits all three roles at the same time. So we're in the superhero battle room with Kenneth Frownfelter. He is a man who has served in the Marines and is an LEO. So he's military, he's veteran, he's first responder. He could take over the brand because I don't even have all three in my background. And he now serves our community through adversity and growth. And this is what he goes over and empowers the entire community. So I'm going to bring him on the floor to go over and share his story. Hey, Ken, do I have you?
Yep, I'm here.
All right. So basically, I told the world that you can take over my show since you have all three roles, but we're going to at least get your story out there first. So we're going to talk about your first part of your identity, which is the military side. What inspired you to join the United States Marine Corps? Because for me, oh no, I would have died. So why just sign up?
I was born in the 70s and I grew up in the 80s. And if we all remember the 1980s, those of us that do, one of the big things that was there was G.I. Joe. That was I like them better than Transformers, better than Star Wars, better than all that, everything else combined. It was G.I. Joe. And I learned patriotism from that show. I learned teamwork from that show. And then the PSAs afterwards. And that's all I wanted to do. I would have, if one would break, I would have a burial in the backyard with them and the whole thing. And so I decided I want to join the military when I got out of school. So all through my high school years, it was just learning to everything that would be for the military. I wanted to learn it. I wanted to do it. I made sure my friend and I, we both had the kind of same mentality. We would make sure before lunch, we would go down by the gym, bump out 10, 15 pull-ups before actually going in to eat lunch at the cafeteria, because the whole idea was we thought, or we'd read somewhere or something along those lines, that what you needed was that's what the Rangers did, or that's what the Green Berets did before they went in during their training. So it was just, everything was geared towards the military when I was a kid, and that's what I wanted to do. Not that my parents pushed me. My dad was in Vietnam. He flew helicopters in Vietnam, and my brother had gone into the army, but they didn't push me. Nobody had pushed me to do any of that stuff. My grandpa was in World War II. My other grandpa was in Korea. It was just, I saw that in my family all the time. My grandparents, they watched old World War II movies and all that stuff like that. But nobody pushed and said, this is what you need to do. What I did know is that my grades were not of the caliber that I was going to get any kind of scholarship. And I had no idea how I was going to pay for college. And so what I said is, I guess I'm going to do the military, because I can't live at home forever. My mom's not going to let me do that. So before graduating, I spoke to a recruiter. I was actually going to speak to the Army recruiter, but I walked into the office and they were closed. They had gone to lunch or something like that. And the Marines were right across the way. And the Marine recruiter was standing in the doorway. And he's like, why don't you come on over here? And I said, I'll just come back, talk to these guys later. Well, the next week or whatever, that same recruiter for the Marine Corps was at our commons at our high school. And when I saw him there, I went over and talked to him, said hi, and we got to talking. And next thing you know, I'm having him come over, meet my parents, and he's having me join into the pool program and learn about the Marine Corps before actually going to the Marine Corps just a month or so after graduating high school.
You know, that's the funniest thing about all the veterans and everybody I interview. We see the other recruiter and they're not reliable. And then the other recruiter comes in and is more reliable. And a lot of the times, like, I went in because they were faithful and available and they were teachable and they were a servant. They had the good facts. The other one wasn't there. They didn't answer the phone. I have a friend right now that wants to go active duty. And she's like, the main reason I don't want to go active duty is two reasons. One, because she likes the stability of the reserves. But secondarily, they don't answer. And it's like, so it's very interesting. You just got to call the right recruiter at the right time. So you went from one to the other just because, like, hey, I'm still here. And they're like, ooh, pick me.
Right. Yeah.
So you signed up because you were military bound from the get-go. Compared to me, you are the G.I. Joe. I was definitely not G.I. Joe. I was G.I. broke. That's what I was.
Yeah.
So going from there, you served maybe 2 years, 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, not long, but I'd like to hear the backstory. So if you can tell me how long you served, and then what's the backstory of becoming a veteran? Because if you dreamed about this since a kid, did you actually retire? Did you go over and do the full term? Or what was the next steps?
No, actually, I got hurt uh, not too long after being in, and there was a lot of downsizing in the mid '90s. Those of you that are listening recall President Clinton shutting down bases and just knocking down the numbers of the military. Well, I got caught in that. I got injured. I got a big old scar on my knee to prove that. I've got get injured, hurt my knee up pretty good, and they said, you know what? Hey, we're gonna go ahead and work you out of the Marine Corps. So that moved me out of the Marine Corps with an honorable, however, even injured, and I'm now in my mid 20s or early 20s trying to figure out what I'm gonna do next, and it wasn't for another maybe 10 years, maybe 9 years that my next calling came a calling.
Interesting. So literally between I remember reading about this because I came in 2000,
Mhm.
1992 to 1997. I knew they were cutting down. They like shifted a bunch of they call them AFSCs in the Air Force and they started shredding them out and they just took everybody. It's like, I broke a nail, you're out.
Yep,
Oh, I went to the doctor once, you're out. Hey,
yep.
I went to talk to a counselor, I'm out. That's how the mental health stigma actually built in the 90s because literally if you had one appointment, they'd be like gone. So you got out because of injuries and everything else. And that 9 year gap, how was that transition when you left the military? Because you said it was a 9 years until your next calling. How was that transition when you left the military in the 90s?
It was difficult. I mean, that's your formative years. You gotta think about in your early 20s, that's when, men and women become the person that they are. That's when you start learning about yourself. You start learning who it is. You're not so much trying to impress everybody anymore, but you're trying to figure it out. I had little kids. I was married, and I was working the most dead end, go nowhere job a person could be working. And I was in a small town, and I just felt like I was spinning my wheels, and I felt like the world was spinning around me, and I was going nowhere. As a matter of fact, my stepmom at the time even said, "What are you doing here? You're not doing anything." And she wasn't saying it demeaningly. She was saying it in a way that was um, kind of trying to motivate me. Like, "What are you doing here?" And I couldn't answer her question other than the fact that that's where we had settled because of my now ex-wife, but my kids were going to school there, the whole thing, and, um, I thought that's what I'm doing, but I'm supposed to do. But I'm in my early 20s, I should be doing more, I should be and my knee wasn't as bad as it was anymore, and I was able to it actually healed up quite a bit, and I'd started talking to a recruiter again, but my ex-wife now, wife at the time, she was not about me going back in the military, and so it didn't so much pan out that time, but it was a little bit difficult, on my mental health, and I didn't even realize it at the time. You're pretty resilient when you're fairly young, and I had no idea that what I wanted was fleeting, and because I was going nowhere with my time in my life at the time. So, when I started saying, "You know what? I think I wanna be a police officer because that's here. I don't have to go anywhere. I can be home with the kids. I can still be at home." And, she was not into that idea either because, she had some other things that in her life that she needed to deal with, and being married to a police officer was not something that she wanted to do. As a matter of fact, one of the things she said to me was, "If you wanna wear polyester so bad, why don't you become a postman?" It's not about the polyester, and besides, police officers don't wear polyester anymore. So, that was the thing. Um just going from that transition of doing something and being something to doing nothing to the prospect of doing something again and being something again. What that was kind of the impetus for me to go into law enforcement that way.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's hard. It's hard enough to go over and to be in the military, and then you have a mil spouse. And then if you're making that transformation to becoming an LEO or becoming a business person, having that person that supports you is huge
Yeah.
in that particular regard. And I think only the Air Force wore polyester in the 70s. Our jackets were pretty nasty. So
Yeah, I have
I don't
no
know who
idea.
wore polyester because I used to do postal special duty, and even knowing the postal people, I'm like, who wore polyester? So that's an interesting
Yeah.
one. I'm like,
Right.
I
Yeah.
guess if you want to light up and be flammable, wear it. That was the
Or if you have a limited mindset
yeah.
that you think everybody wears polyester. So
So 9 years to the calling. So okay, so you didn't have a supportive spouse and everything else, and I guess they wanted you to be the 9 to 5, like at home type of job. What made you pivot to serve your current community? Because now you fit all the roles, military veteran and LEO. So 9 years went by. What made you actually make that pivot?
so I like I said, I wanted to do something like that. I'd been wanting to do that for a long time. I'd mentioned that I wanted to be in the military, and when I got into there and I did that, that was cool. I there was camaraderie that was built up. There was teamwork that was built up, all that stuff like that. But then when you get into I knew that uh getting in doing the police department would be the next, I guess, best thing, especially in a local community. I didn't want to go into the reserves or anything like that. I'd have to go away every other weekend or whatever. But I could do the teamwork, the camaraderie, the service from, my community and where I lived. And you mentioned something just a second ago, and that was that supportive wife. And that's not something that I had at the time. Matter of fact, I had tested, I don't know how many different departments, several different departments I tested at. And that was the time when there was 150 candidates, say, for 3 positions. And when you'd go to test for these positions, they were they were standing room only. And you're maybe right doing your test standing up against a wall or sitting on the floor or whatever the case is. And they're inside a high school gymnasium or a high school cafeteria or whatever. And um, when I'd come back home after saying, "Oh, how'd you do on the test?" Maybe I don't think I did very well, and maybe I didn't pass it, or whatever the case is, or I passed it but only barely, and I didn't pass the next portion, or whatever the case may be. Finally, we were kind of on the rocks, and we split up, and we ultimately got a divorce. I'd say months after getting my divorce, I got I tested again, and I passed the testing, and was picked up by a police department. What I noticed was my mindset in when I would go into those testing, when I went before, I knew I didn't have the support of my wife at the time. She wasn't supportive. She didn't want to be married to a police officer. She didn't want to have anything like that. When I wasn't married to her anymore, I didn't have to worry about that baggage. I didn't have to worry about that thought process. And so what I did is I was able to take the test and go through the whole process without the stress of worrying that I'm upsetting somebody or I'm not going to have the support or whatever the case may be. So what I did was I went in there, passed it, got through the whole process, and even my background investigator came back and said that he has to go and talk to everybody he knows, including your ex-wife. He says your ex-wife was the nicest ex-wife I've ever spoken to. She had nothing but good things to say about you. And which is weird. She wanted to see me succeed, but she didn't want to be part of that success. We just were on divergent paths, and it was it really made the difference to me knowing that you need support. In this position, in this kind of world, you have to have support. Now that goes for the military, that goes for first responders, that goes for law enforcement. It goes for any type of position like this. You need to have that support. And if you don't have that, you don't have anywhere to go and be able to let your guard down. You don't have anywhere to take your baggage off and let that person carry your load for a little bit. And you don't have somebody to be looking out for you when you are stressing out. And so when you are worried about this or that, because you get called in, uh, they're able to take care of the home. They're able to do the things, get the kids to the soccer games or whatever. you have that, and you don't have to worry about that, because if you have a supportive spouse, and that goes for men or women, it doesn't matter what it is, that supportive spouse makes the difference for your success.
I would say that's huge. I mean, I don't know if you guys have a code name for your spouses. Like we have that when it's military, it's mil spouse. When it's a veteran, it's vet spouse. I don't know if there's like a first spouse in the sense of like maybe I don't know if you guys have a code name, but I think they need to be your first. I know it sounds kind of wrong. I'm spitballing right now, but without having that, I don't know, second responder. I'm spitballing names. Anyway,
Right.
because you're the first responder, but they're absorbing it almost like a secondhand smoke in a sense when you're coming home. When you cross from the boardroom to the living room and into the bedroom, and then depending on your relationship in that prayer room, if you don't have that synergistic going up and having that in there, that can go over any road
Yeah.
because the reason why I started serving first responders was because I finally saw what you guys went through. Me and my girls, and I'm not trying to take over the whole show, but I'm just trying to see.
Don't worry about it.
But the
Your
reason
show.
why is my two girls were with me, and my other two kids were in summer camp. So I have like 4 kids, and we were in Scottsdale, Arizona. And me and the wife and the 2 girls are like, let's go get a cookie. So beautiful area, walk over, cross the street, get there. And then as we're walking back, and there's like a grassy plot, and then there's like a street right there, this motorcycle comes through, goes to the intersection, truck right behind it. The truck didn't want to go and get the red light. So it zooms through, hits the motorcyclist, and then just the guy scrapes across the concrete.
Hmm.
I'm like the only one there. So I had to become a first responder in that moment. I get to
Yeah.
the ground and everything else and whatnot, and I'm about to do CPR. And thank the Lord there was a real first responder. He wasn't in uniform, but he ran over and then started doing the CPR. And
Right.
then I still stayed there as a witness and everything else. And that's when I realized you guys never get to turn it off. When we were military, you were either deployed or at work, and when at least at 5 o'clock, you might be struggling in the mind, but at least you didn't have those calls. Like in my 24 years of service, I've only been called a few times, and it was
Yeah.
because I was an IT guy. It's like, oh, network's down. Okay, whatever. But you are always on, like every place you go. It's just like, even when you're at home in your safe space, you could be called up because you're responding to your city. So if something goes bad in your city and they need more people, they could call you on. You could be walking out, just like I said, running, doing a morning jog off your off duty, and just like out of hat, the guy responded and gave CPR. Unfortunately, the guy died. That was the motorcycle accident. But
Mm-hmm.
that's when I realized, I'm like, you guys, I need to serve you guys just as much as I serve my military and my veterans. So
Right.
I want to give credit for any ladies or gentlemen that are married to first responders. We'll figure out a really cool name for it later on. We'll spitball it later. But you guys are the war front for them to go over and have that home front, that you are able to help them in that battlefield. So ladies and gentlemen that are married to first responders, when you're in there, you need to be that Engedi. It's a Hebrew word for basically a desert oasis for them, so they can go over and recover and continue to serve.
Right.
So I want to
Yeah. I
thank
look
you.
at it. I
Yeah.
look at it like and I've had talks with other guys about this. It's like your fortress of solitude, right? Superman had that fortress of solitude, and he was able to go there and he could take his cape off and he can just relax, right? Well, that's what you should be able to do at your home. You go there, you can go into your house, you can take your armor off because you go out there and and don your armor and you protect. You come back, you got to take that armor off, you got to take that load off. And you have to be able to speak your piece and let that person know that you're speaking just to get it off your chest. And because if you keep filling up your cup, and this is where the mental health side comes in, you keep filling up your cup with other people's issues, this one over here, this one over here, that one over here. At what point is that going to start overflowing and start causing a mess? So you have to empty that cup out. That's where your spouse comes in. That's where she or he is very important. They can listen to you. They are willing to listen to you, and they are willing to look at the issues that you're having. They've developed a relationship with you so well, in fact, they can start seeing you acting a little bit different if you are. And if that's the case, they can ask you, "Are you okay?" And you're going to, what are you going to say? "I'm good. I'm fine. Everything's good." And they have to be able to call you out on it. Be comfortable enough to call you out and say, nope, you're different now. What is going on? I need to know what's happening, and not in a negative or hurtful or painful or rude way, but a way that they want to see you back to who you are, back to the one person you are. Because this job, law enforcement and firefighters as well, to an extent, but law enforcement, it starts taking a toll. You start seeing the most evil, vile, mean creatures that run this planet, and you have to deal with them every single day. And if, like you said, we can't shut it off. You can be sitting at home and your neighbor comes over. Hey, I've got a question. I know you're a cop. Hey, my husband's doing this or this person's doing that. What can I do here? Or you have some other issue that comes up. You're at a party. Hey, tell me about police work. Or you are driving down the street and you witness a crash. What are you going to do? You keep driving? No, you pull over, you start doing whatever. It happened to me last week, as a matter of fact. You go in to go get a hamburger at a diner, and the waitress knows you're a cop because you've come in there for a call before, and she goes, hey, let me ask you a question about I've got this domestic violence issue or whatever in my personal life. All of a sudden you are now having to go back into that. You're wearing flip-flops and shorts, and you're having to put your mind back in that spot. So you have to have that place that you can go retreat to and shut it off and have somebody there to be able to listen and absorb some of that stuff. And she's not going to internalize it, or he's not going to internalize it. They're going to take it and they're going to just go put it away, because it's not their burden to carry. It's your burden to carry. And so your burden has to come off at some point, and you have to have somebody there that is willing to listen and willing to take on some of that burden of yours, but they don't have to carry it. They just have to take it from you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When we talk about war heroes, superheroes, it's also about the prayer room, because in our belief, God can go over and help you take that burden off as you and your spouse go over and are both synergies coming together. Because even in the mental health industry, I worked in there in a couple of years, and it's like, I think of the analogy, like you said, the cup, and I know this is an invisible cup as everybody's looking at this. Let me see if I can find something different that doesn't blow my screen. Let's use the yoga cup, for example.
Right.
If you go over and kept filling this and dirty water's coming in, the work, the job, and everything else, it's eventually going to flow over and spill on everything else.
Yep.
We need to have a living well and a living spring to go push on all that junk out. Because if I fill this with enough clean water, eventually the dirt, the grime, and everything comes out, and then it becomes clean again. And then we're outpouring in there. So we need to have a place in our home to go over and to do that. Sometimes it's going to be in the bedroom with your spouse. Sometimes it's going to be in your prayer closet. Sometimes it's going to be a combination of both. Sometimes it's with your kids in the living room, of just being a kid with your kids in that particular regard. So that's huge. And I want to talk more about, what do you do specifically now with being in the LEO? I think you said about 18 years, and when we were on the back screen of that, is what is your secret fuel when the pressure and tough times come up? Because that could be any moment, any day for you.
Right. And it's there's that, it's like that invisible wall that's right there all the time. It's right here. You don't know how long when it's going to kick off. And you don't know if you're going to get a phone call right now. You don't know if you're going to miss when your kid's birthday or whatever the case may be. You don't know what's going to happen next. And so there's that pressure of the unknown. Aside from that, there's the pressure of the job itself, that thing that just is always waiting there and having to go deal with it. When you're getting off work, you're laying in bed, you on your day off, you wake up and you're like, oh, when I get back to work, I got to make sure I take care of this and this and this. And I got that. Oh, I've got court coming up. Oh, I got to think about that. And you have all these things that just kind of just continuously mill around. You have to be able to compartmentalize. You have to be able to say, I am not at work right now. I'm shutting that off and I'm putting that over here. I am focusing on this and this alone. And that's what I'm going to do. And I've got things that I do on my off time that I like to do and I focus on. And I don't think about work when I'm doing that. Now, I might get a phone call or I might get a text from work asking about, hey, did you get this? And where's that at? Or whatever the case may be. Or I sometimes even get texts from other guys at work, and I will look at it like, oh, what do they want? And I look at it and say, maybe it's a TikTok or it's a joke or it's whatever. Right. And the stress kind of goes up and then it drops off, because I realize it's relationships that are calling, not the job. And so compartmentalizing is a big thing. The other thing that I like to do is I work out every single day except Sundays. I will get up. Right now I'm on day shift, so I get up my shift starts at 6. I'm getting up at 3:30 so I can make it to the gym. I can get to the gym, I can do what I need to do, then I can get to work. I can be into work on time. That saves the rest of my day. I work 12-hour shifts. When I get home, I am not in the mood to be working out, but I have to work out because I know I have to prepare myself for any possible outcome. I need to be able to save myself or save my partners. Aside from that, I need to be able to know that I've accomplished something. So you build up your own knowledge and your own belief and your own wherewithal by by lifting heavy things. It's important that you lift heavy things. That's how you get a lot of aggression out. That's how you get a lot of tension out. You do that. I also practice martial arts. I teach karate, and I practice myself. I get a little bit of aggression out there. I play the drums. I get some aggression out in that. There are hobbies that you have to do. And everybody's going to find their own thing that works for them, but you got to have some kind of outlet. And that's how you deal with a lot of the stress and a lot of the pressure, having that outlet. If you don't have that outlet, it's going to just build up on you. And aside from that, you got to have that positive self-talk. And I'm not talking, you're wonderful, you're beautiful, you can do it. None of that stuff. I'm talking about real life positive talk, positive self-talk. You don't say you're stupid. You never tell yourself you're stupid. You don't tell, oh man, that was so dumb. You shouldn't have done that. You might go back like, oh, great, we're going to do this again. Yeah, then we're going to do this again. You don't have to go to work. You get to go to work. You don't have to do something. You get to do something. You have to have that positive self-talk. You got to have that talk that says, okay, if I got to do this, let's get it done. And you go make it happen. It's not going to happen on its own. You take control. And so a lot of the idea is that knowing that you have outlets, you have positive self-talk, and you push forward with almost an aggressive but more assertive fashion where you are controlling it and you own what you do. You never lie, you never lie to yourself, and you don't lie to other people, and you hold yourself to a standard. You have that will make you know that you can reach this point that you're trying to get to. Now, when you're getting stressed out and you're going through all those things, you might think, oh, there's just too much coming at me. Adversity is good. Adversity needs to come your way, and that's how you grow and you become better. Think about the crab. How does that crab grow? It's painful. It hurts for them to take that shell off. And if they take that shell off, that thing's going to slough off, and a new one's going to grow in its place. But they have to go through the pain and the discomfort of that shell coming off. Same thing with humans. We have to go through a very uncomfortable position and time in order for us to grow. And you're not going to just go back and say, oh, that wasn't difficult and I've gotten to here without any difficulty, because then you're not going to have grown and you're not going to have learned anything, and you're going to be the same person you were 5-10 years ago. And if you are, you're not making any progress. And if you're not making progress, what are you doing?
That's huge to go over. I think most of us are adversity and growth avoidance. There's a culture of obviously adversity and growth mindset, but I think the natural of ourselves, we avoid adversity, we avoid growth. I mean, come on. It's like we just scroll it away. At least that's
Right.
what I'll call it. We scroll it away.
What do we tell? What do we tell each other when we if you don't like something, you don't have to comment on something. You can scroll past it. And so that's the idea. You're scrolling right past it.
Mm-hmm. So that's a huge, hopefully the AI picks up that in the reel. All right. Our last and final question we ask every single person is 3 superhero tactics. So you can go as far back as the 70s if you want to visit, or you can bring it back today. If you were either mentoring your past self or somebody that you're mentoring, 3 superhero tactics that you would give this person to go from surviving to thriving.
I would say everything you do affects somebody else. And we're not meant to be on this planet as hermits. We're meant to be on this planet for other people. So with that being the case, you have to think about how what you do affects somebody else. And if you can affect them in a positive way, you've got to do that. I heard Patrick Bet David once say that there's 4 different kinds of people. There's adders, subtractors, multipliers, and dividers. The subtractors, they go in and they take away from everybody. And you know these people, and you walk into a room and it's just a negative place. The positive people, they go in there and they add to it, and they add to the room, and they add to your life, and it's fantastic. The dividers, they come in, they take away. And then the dividers, they'll come in and they'll just try to separate, and they'll try to they're like the subtractors on steroids. But then the multipliers, those guys, they're the ones they're just building. They're going to call you up and they're going to say, hey, I just thought about this investment. You should think about this, or whatever the case may be, right? They're multiplying your life. And so if you have the opportunity, be a multiplier. That would be one. Another tactic I would think would be beneficial would be to serve other people. Put other people first. You have the opportunity to serve them. And if you see something that needs to get done, you see a mess that needs to be cleaned up, you see the trash that needs to be taken out, serve somebody else so they don't have to do it. You may not get any kind of accolade for it. You won't even get a thank you, but just do it and just grow into it, right? Serve other people, especially if you're feeling down and you're feeling like you're worthless. You serve somebody, that's going to change your mindset, and you're going to now feel different about that because you are adding to somebody's life. You may be even multiplying it, but serving them makes the difference. And the third tactic I would say, and we covered this previously, and that would be face adversity. Look for the opportunity for adversity. And what I mean by that is that you have to go out of your way. There's 3 different ways. There's adversity that's given to you. There's adversity that is thrust upon you, and there's adversity that you choose to take on. Now, there's a mountain in your way. Did somebody put you in there, or did they put the mountain in the way, or did you choose to walk up to the edge of that mountain? And if that's the case, walk up to the edge and then keep going, start climbing that mountain. And that will teach you the lesson. The lesson's not about the prize at the end. The lesson is about the journey in the process. Climb that mountain, face that adversity, push that limit that you need to get to. Everybody's is different. Not everybody's going to be a David Goggins, and not everybody's going to be a Rocky Balboa. But what you have to do is you have to find the adversity. And so when it comes, don't pray for this adversity to go away, but pray for the strength to be able to fight through that adversity. And if you pray for that the ability to fight through that adversity, don't be surprised when God said, okay, I'm going to make the adversity harder, so the next time you have it, this will be no problem for you. That's what adversity does. That prepares you for the next time.
Yeah, that reminds me of that Morgan Freeman video that's on TikTok. You see Morgan Freeman and the other woman from Gilbert Girls. I don't remember her name, but he goes over and he's talking about God. And he's like, well, when I pray for this, God gives me this and everything else. And he goes back and forth and talks about, like, if I want patience, I get opportunities for patience. If I'm praying for wisdom, I get an opportunity to go learn wisdom and connect with people and everything else. So very similar in that regard is that if you are adversity adverse, you still might get the trial, but if you ask for the adversity and to climb that mountain, you might be getting a harder challenge, but the journey will be fruitful at the end.
Absolutely. It's the story of the guy on top of his house during the flood. Have you heard that story?
Oh yeah, definitely familiar with that.
Yeah. That's the idea, is that God might keep sending you the ability to do it, but if you're not taking him up on that opportunity, you're going to miss it and you're going to fail it. So take him up on it. And when it comes your way, put your head down, dig your feet in, and start driving.
Well, speaking of that, this was a great driving interview, and you get to close out the interview with next steps to connect with the people, that audience you want to connect with. and then close us out with a quote, and then we will go to credits. And thank you for going over and giving such a great interview on adversity and growth. But the floor is now yours, and then after that, we will close it out.
Well, I guess I would say that if you have the opportunity, let's say you had a time machine and you could go back in time and you meet yourself at 8 years old, would that 8-year-old self of yours look at you and say, that's who I want to be when I grow up? If you can't do that, then you need to start working and become that person. If you can, well, you're doing great. You need to find your next challenge. And that's the trick with veterans, law enforcement guys, first responders, is we're always getting to that point and we're forgetting that we need to find our next challenge because we're so tired from our previous one. But if you don't keep moving to the next challenge, you're not going to build yourself and progress and become better because you don't want to be the same person you were last year. So look at yourself as being that hero that you wanted to be when you were a kid.